Good evening. We will call our meeting to order, and with that, we'll jump right into roll call.
All members are present.
Fantastic. Next on the agenda, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If the golf team would like to lead us in the pledge, we will all stand, and all you say is aye, and we will follow thereafter. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the Dr. Beresdorf makes his way to the podium to lead us in our special presentations, the board is very appreciative and very excited to have all of our families with us to celebrate our scholar athletes. And with that, we'll turn the podium over to Dr. Beresford.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Inskeep, who's going to introduce to us the state champion golf team. I just had the pleasure of shaking hands with every one of them, so when they hit the PGA Tour, I can say I shook hands with them here at Carmel Clay Schools at the board meeting this evening. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mr. Inskeep, and he will do the presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beresford and Mrs. Spanenberg, members of the board. If I could have members of the team and Coach Ross and Coach Reed come up here for a second. Come up right alongside me. My left, your right. I must say this is the best dressed sports team we've had here, guys. These Greyhounds capped off the 2017-2018 school year for us with a very special state championship just down the street at Prairie View. The kids have been working so hard for a number of years, but for this group in particular, they finished very close runner-up in 2017 to Center Grove, and last June were able to turn the tables and win by a very convincing one stroke. So it was really a fantastic day. And for those that were in attendance, our parents and many of their family and friends, and obviously the young men you see in front of you and their other teammates that weren't here tonight, it was just a very exciting finish to a great 2 days tournament in which it came down to the last putt on the last hole. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our members of the team that are here this evening. Head coach is Chard Reed, who's right here, Adam Ross, assistant coach, and Damian Neild, assistant coach as well. If you want to come forward to the board and shake hands. There you go. Also, Clay Sturzman. Nicholas Dentino. Jack Crawford. Cole Harris. And Luke Prawl. And all five of these young men will be back this spring as well, which we're very excited about, not only for our golf season, but just the way they represent us in the hallways of Carmel High School. They're great young men. Thank you.
Congratulations, guys. Well, congratulations to our golf team. I know my husband, who played golf all 4 years at Carmel and then over at Butler, is very excited and thrilled that we were so successful this year. So, with that, moving right along, we do not have anybody wishing to participate in public comment, so we'll move straight to consent. May I get a motion on the table to approve consent?
So move.
Lynn, thank you. Second? Second. Discussion. All those in favor of approving consent signify by saying aye. Aye. Next, we move to action. Our first action item is the approval of the agreements between Carmel Clay Schools and the Skillman Corporation. And with that, we turn to Mr. McMichael.
Thank you. As the board knows, this tentative agreement was presented to you at the last meeting. Since then, John Becker with Church and Hiddle, who's in the audience here this evening, has thoroughly vetted both this contract as well as the CSO contract, and so we're recommending your approval of this contract.
Thank you, Mr. McMichael. I will open up to floor to questions. I first want to thank you and Church Hiddle for providing us the red line contract. I know the board had a number of questions and concerns, and it made it far easier to determine if those were addressed.
Yes.
And so with that, we really do appreciate the markups. I'll turn to the floor if there are additional questions this time around. Yes, Pam.
I also want to say thank you very much for listening to us last time and for incorporating all of the questions into the contract, because there were a lot of my personal concerns are now in the contract, which I really appreciate. Other than a couple of minor grammatical things, which I caught, I was concerned about the cost of the project. Well, that's the CSO project. But I did notice that the construction manager has more responsibility in this particular contract than in the original contract, and I appreciate that as well. Has more oversight, has to be on site more often, and so that makes me feel better. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Mike?
I guess my first question, are we doing it contract by contract, or you want it all at once?
No, we'll just do this one, then do the second one separately.
So the first...
Skillman or all, you mean Skillman and CSO? Yeah. Only Skillman at this time.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I echo the thank yous to Church and Hiddle, and appreciate the typos that Pam caught. I have one more, and I apologize in advance for not sending it, but I was looking at it while I was traveling this weekend, and I'm happy to provide the page, but it's section 3.9, and it's the second sentence. It says, the contractor will help ensure all materials and equipment are incorporated by the contractors, and I'm wondering if that's really the construction manager's responsibility, and I'll share this page with John after the meeting. And I think the other comments were addressed by Pam in her email, so.
Well, that being said, if we're going to approve the contract, do we need to have that addressed prior to approving the contract? John?
Yes.
Sure. Yes, please.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. One of the things that I try to do in all my contracts is to make sure you guys get the best deal you get. At the end of the day, the taxpayers need a great job. They're going to get a great job. And the other thing I wanted to point out is this is part one. Part two is going to be the contractor agreement. It's going to be a lot longer, but we're going to get you a good deal as well. We'll obviously put a lot of language in there. What I've tried to do is incorporate what other schools have done well and make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that other schools have made in the past as well. So I think you've raised a really good point. When I'm looking at that, it does appear that it should have been the construction manager shall make sure that the contractors incorporate all those goods and materials. Would that be your reading as well?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that would be correct. It should be the construction manager will help ensure, because obviously the contractor should be doing it already.
3.3.9, and it just said the contractor will help ensure blah, blah, blah by the contractors. So it just seemed like that was the manager's responsibility. And then I guess, so the other comments that Pam raised, I don't know when, have they been provided to you before the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
And what was interesting is I didn't get your comments until after I started revising the contract. So a lot of what you guys had pointed out were things that I actually appreciated you guys noticing as well. And so I think we were on the same tandem on this project. So I actually appreciate that feedback because it's helpful to know exactly what you want in this document.
Mike, can you reference the page for 3.3.9?
I mean, I'm looking at the red line. Is it page 11?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I see.
I just want to make sure I see that, and then, Mike, you can make an amendment to what we have stated here, so we are all on the same page and approve a contract that we are all comfortable with.
Okay, I mean, that goes back to so Pam's email last, was it Friday?
Yes.
So, John, did you see those?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, he sent, Roger sent answers to those this afternoon.
okay.
Okay, so you are amending, here, okay, how about this, Mike? Will you please make an amendment to 3.3.9?
I move that we amend section 3.3.9 to replace the word contractor in the second section with construction manager, and that we and with that, well, I guess I don't need to say any more about it because we'll approve the rest of the contract separately, right?
Can I make a, I read that a little differently, because it says the construction manager shall cause the contractor, and I think it should say to correct such non-complying work prior to the expiration of any warranty. So it would be the contractor's responsibility to fix the work that they didn't do correctly. Isn't that right?
That is correct. So the construction, you're looking at the last sentence of
Mike is amending.
3.3.9?
It's the second to last sentence.
Okay. Yeah, so the construction manager is going to make sure that if there's a problem with the work
Right.
that the contractor did, the construction manager will be on site to make sure that those things are corrected.
Okay, I think the wording is the construction manager shall cause the contractor shall correct.
To correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it should be to correct instead of shall.
Right. Is that agreeable?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so we have, the first amendment would be, Mike, include...
I can do one amendment if you,
Do you want to do both?
that's fine.
Let's re-amend. Let's
Okay.
amend.
So
Amend the amendment.
I move that we amend the resolution to approve the contract with Skillman Corporation, subject to language being corrected to revise paragraph 3.3.9. In the second sentence, the word contractor will be replaced with construction manager, and in the second to last sentence, the second shall be replaced with to, so that it reads to correct instead of shall correct.
Yes.
Do I second
Thank
that?
you. We have, yes, I have an amendment.
Second?
Second. Any discussion or questions? Okay, so what we have on the table right now is the approval of the Skillman contract with amendments made to paragraph 3.3.9.
So moved.
Any discussion?
Oh.
That's okay.
For the amendment? Or
Well, no, that's what we have on the table. Right, we currently have on the table
Right.
are reading this contract with amendments, which we just moved to approve. Are there any questions furthermore on the contract itself? Okay, all those in favor of supporting the contract with Skillman as provided in this contract with the amendment to 3.3.9? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone against? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on. Next, Roger? Yes.
Who seconded that? So Pam moved, right? I believe I did. Okay.
It was Katie.
Sorry, I wrote that. Sorry. Thank you.
Are we ready, Colleen? Fantastic. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of our agreement with Carmel Clay Schools and CSO Architects, and with that, we'll turn to Mr. McMichael.
Yes, again, we would, after having this reviewed by John, we would recommend your approval for this as well.
Thank you, Roger. A couple of things I just wanted to point out. I, once again, very much appreciate the red line contract included. It was also very helpful to have these additional exhibits provided to us with the scope of service as well as the estimated fees. So I very much appreciate that. To that, we will open up the floor to questions. Pam.
Yes. I have a concern about the project cost, since the project is estimated to cost between 22 and 25 million, and I understand that that is only the construction cost. So we need to add in the cost for the fees for both Skillman and CSO, and all the fees that were listed, the hourly rates. And I think that's going to be around 2.5 million per company.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so that would bring the cost up to about 29 million. I also asked the question, does that include the demolition of Carmel Elementary, and did not get an answer to that.
Yeah, first, the cost will include Carmel Elementary. And it's, at this stage in the game, the answer is yes. That's why, it's a pretty rough figure between 22 and 25 million. The total cost, keeping in mind that those fees are split between two schools. So the preliminary estimate was, that I shared with you a month or two ago, was like $29,750, so just under $30 million. That's all in cost. So in addition to the costs that you described, there are other costs as well. Some of them are minor, relatively speaking, but we have permitting, we have furnishings, those type of costs. As far as project costs, they're not in there, but they are within the approximately $30 million per school. So, but you're correct, the 22 to 25 is construction cost only.
Okay. The second question, I also noticed that the fees are only effective through June 30th, 2019.
You mean for the reimbursable hourly rates or whatever?
The hourly rates, right. And was wondering if we have any guarantee that there won't be a significant increase in those costs, or will the costs increase during the 2 to 3 years that this building is being done?
Yeah, I would assume they'll increase because you're talking about hourly rates, so assuming people receive raises and so forth. We don't have a guarantees per se, but we will all know 2 or 3 years from now what the cost of living is or has been, and we'll have certainly an opinion on kind of a reasonable increase in those rates. And so it would be highly unlikely that would become an area of dispute. First of all, in relationship to the fees, those are only if we need additional hourly rate beyond what's in the scope of the contract. So it's a relatively insignificant cost to begin with, and given as you said, a $2.5 million contract, wouldn't be likely that we'd find ourselves in a dispute over an hourly rate for something like this.
I'm checking because I know that in the new contract, they're to be on site more often than they were in the other contract. That's the way I read it.
Yeah, but that's not a part of, those rates wouldn't apply to, that's a part of the basic services.
That's the basics. As
within the 2.5
many
million.
times as they go on site, that's part of the
Right.
basic service.
Yes.
Okay.
Roger, could you give us some examples of when this hourly rate would kick in?
Oh, let me think here. Could be if we had reason to want, say, people to work on the weekends or something. Maybe there was a time issue or something that we felt, that we were responsible for, that it wasn't their failing. And we were simply asking them to work overtime, you might say, something like that. It's not likely that those kind of situations will come into play on this project.
Okay. And I also appreciate the fact that I think the 10% was negotiated out of the
Yes.
reimbursables, and I thank you for that.
Katie?
I just wanted to tell, like, what it says by reimbursables. Like, I wanted to let people kind of know, like, so that's like telephone calls, parking fees, print items, travel expenses, consultant fees. So that's all. So when we're talking about that 10%, that's a big deal, because all those things have been removed. Shipping, telephone charges.
Mike?
Okay, I guess, thank you. First, I think in terms of, it's important to remember that the construction cost at this point is just an estimate, so that we won't know, we don't even know what we're going to build, yet a low bid. So while in all practicality it could come back lower, even though probably unlikely, we'll have to make those choices at a later date. And then, I think, have one substantive question for council, and again, I apologize for not sending it in advance, but it's under copyrights and licenses, and there's a bunch of additions and deletions and moving around, and as my read of it is,
What page?
it's Article 7, mostly 7.3. And I guess my question is if we pay everything and do everything, do we have a license to use the plans for a third school? The way I read it, that was taken out, and that we've got the ability to use it for maintaining, repairing, altering, constructing this project, but that we don't have the ability to use it on another project site. And I guess it would just be, is that the intent that the architect owns the plans, or is it the intent that we would own the plans after we fully paid for them?
Right, that's an excellent question. Let me tell you what the intent was, and oftentimes, you might have seen the language before this draft, we were going to have to pay them $100,000. So they were very kind to give us that clawback. The way that this works is that obviously once you've gone through the different phases, the plans become yours. Now, does the architect own the drawings and the ideas and the concepts? From an intellectual property standpoint, they always will. However, you have a license, you have a perpetual license, you have a royalty-free license. So while you have the ability to continue using those plans again and again and again, your question is a very good question. It wasn't contemplated, and I don't know that I've seen in many deals where you would be able to use these drawings and specifications for a third building, because there are so many variables we just don't know about. We could get into different types of soil being underneath the ground, and it's going to cost you a lot more because obviously you might have to dig down deeper. So in answer to your question, it wasn't contemplated that we would be able to use the drawings and the specifications for a building that is out of scope. That is something that we could go back to the architect and ask them. We possibly could ask them if we could perhaps increase the amount, and at that point, they would have additional compensation, so we could use it a third time. The other thing that I would point out is that under this statute, the Public Works statute, we are required to provide these specifications and plans to the regulatory bodies. So your state fire marshal, for example, if you have to go to the city or you have to go to the county permitting departments. So with all those variables that we just don't know about at this point, and I think at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't even drawn the plans and specifications.
Right, we haven't started at all.
So that's kind of the cart before the horse. We don't really even have those specifications. I don't know that we would even know if we could use it at a third site at this point. Is it something we can ask for? Absolutely. Is it something that if you were to pay for it, that it would bring value? I don't know that I can answer that question today.
Well, and I don't know that it needs to be added to the contract, and maybe the question is more for Roger. If we decided down the road that we liked the layout of the new school and we wanted to do it again, then presumably we would hire the same architect and they would not be starting at square one.
Right.
So we would save the money at that point.
We would, yes. And we've got experience with that, as you know. We most recently built 4 schools off of a similar set of plans.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have additional questions, or do you seek any type of clarification to this contract at this time? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I don't have any, other than I know Pam pointed out there were some inconsistencies between the exhibits and I don't remember which contract it was where.
CSO.
Was the CSO. So, I have not looked at, anything besides what was posted as of Thursday, but I don't have any additional questions or comments.
Okay, thank you. Pam, do you have any additional questions?
No, I did ask that question about the
Right.
fees, and that was Exhibit B. So
Okay.
that was taken care of.
Thank you. Floor is open to additional questions for John or Roger. Okay. All questions have been answered. May I get a motion on the table then to approve the contract with CSO Architects as stated?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. John? And Roger.
I would like to add that worked closely with Skillman and with CSO, and they're 2 fine organizations that have built some really fantastic buildings and very reputable companies, and we're glad to be working with them on this important project.
Thank you, Dr. Beresford. Next on the agenda, we have our discussion, the first reading of Policy 3500. I know there was an email that circulated earlier today, and with that, we will turn to the Policy Committee.
Yes. Let's see. Policy 3500 has to deals with the teacher appreciation grants, and ISBA sent out an e-edition of their newsletter, and in that they talked about the teacher appreciation grant and called our attention to it because it's coming up. And Lynn called our attention to that as well, which we appreciate her bringing that to our attention. The only thing that would be different in the current policy is the date of, because it's an effective date of September 14th instead of September 15th, which was in the old policy, and it's also 2018 policy instead of 2017 policy. But the terms of the policy as to what the highly effective and the effective teachers will get will remain the same.
Thank you, Pam. Discussion. Katie?
So is this a policy that will come back to us every year when the date changes?
Yes, it is. The state says by code that we have to do this annually.
And could follow up to that, could the actual policy change itself, or are we really just changing it for the date? We don't really know.
At this point, the way the code reads, we are to discriminate between highly effective and effective teachers. Our percentage was accepted last year as to what the differences were between the highly effective and effective. And I think that's the purpose of the state, trying to figure out whether or not school systems are effectively putting in a distinction between the two rather than putting maybe a dollar amount between the two and really not distinguishing between the two teacher groups. So it may change as teacher evaluation changes. And we also have to send in our teacher evaluation, which we will be using the one from last year and sending that in with this as well. And this year, I understand that the CTA will be working with our administration on coming up with a new teacher evaluation process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Katie, one of the problems that they ran into in previous years when they started giving the grant is that very few schools were actually differentiating between the effective and highly effective. And because of that, based on the spirit of the law, they ended up changing what the criteria was. And I'm glad you pointed out that we are currently working with CTA to develop a big rock, as Dr. Beresford mentioned, and I'm pretty sure you'll get to that later on and share with us some of these fun, exciting things on the agenda.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments about 3500? We will be bringing this, although we typically do not have action items on our meeting agendas for our workshops, we will bring this to the workshop on Tuesday, September 11th, as our second reading and approval so that it can all be sent in by the 14th. Next on the agenda.
I guess
please.
I have just a clarification, I think following up with Katie's comment and looking at the things. So every year we need to adopt and submit? Yes. So we need to calendar every year that we do this, and it wouldn't be helpful to say that our policy is that we'll distribute the annual teacher appreciation grant as follows? I assume the intent is that we should be looking at that 25% every year and saying, does that still make sense? And since this is only 1 year later, we all probably feel that it still makes sense. But
when we originally adopted the policy, the intent was to follow the spirit of the law and the statement made by ISBA to us as well as within the law that said we have to adopt it annually. So even if it had the same language, we would still need to adopt it annually.
And I think there was if I'm not mistaken, there was a minimum amount that you had to...
Yeah, the 25% specified in the code.
Right, that's what I thought. So 25% is the minimum difference between the two that we should be giving. And that's what we decided we would do because we felt that we wanted to keep them as close as possible rather than making this big distinction between the two.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mike. And moving right along, we have our our monthly reports, and for that we have our financial update from Roger.
Okay, get my show going here. Okay, so we're at this point we're right where we would expect to be as far as our ending cash balance for this month, and you can see from the report that we're up slightly from June. We're up to just over $8.7 million for the operating balance. If you compare that to last year, there was a larger gain than that. It was because the revenue was pretty much tracking with this year, or this year's tracking with last year, but the expenses last year under benefits and purchase services were less, and that's just a timing issue as to when purchases, for example, if our annual supplies for elementary students came in and were paid in 1 month versus the other. So we'll have those kind of variations from 1 month to the other, but we're right on track with where we project to be.
Thank you, Roger. I have a question, not necessarily about this one in particular, but what this might look like come January. And I also have a question about the new silos that we're going to be using with the law that goes into effect. I know the board will have opportunities to learn more about that at ISBA, at the conference. And I know Lynn and I have listened to and have attended various programming on funding and the new way that we're going to have funds. We need advice from you on when, because we need to take action on moving accounts. So we will need a lot of direction from your department to help us make some wise decisions and be compliant with the law.
Yes, and you'll hear more about that at September the 11th at the workshop when I present the budget. And as you've alluded to, it's kind of a whole new ballgame from what everybody's used to in the last 40 years or so. And so initially, well, not just initially, we will basically have two funds instead of two hesitating, because we have other funds, such as the referendum fund, that remains separate and so forth. But the other, I think, 6 funds are basically merged into 2, and we're talking about tax-supported funds. So we're not talking about like title funds from the federal government and so forth. We have other funds. But we'll have 2 major funds, and some of the things that are currently in our general fund, all the things that are in our general fund that are not directly related to education, like custodial services, for example, the business office, many of those support areas, will be paid from the second fund, which is the operational fund. So we have an education fund and an operation fund, and part of the process will be that with the revenue side, there will be transfers made. I'm going to say that at least to track what was transferred over, so there's just a number of differences. We will still have a capital projects fund plan, but we will not have a capital projects fund. And so, but we'll have a capital plan, I guess it would be called. And likewise, a bus replacement plan. But those funds that we're typically have seen as separate funds now are all in the operation, within that operational fund.
Out of curiosity, will we be able to tax? No, we tax for specific, like for bus replacement. We tax that and it's currently by itself. Yes. Will we no longer be doing that and all the money goes into one fund and then we use what we need?
Not exactly, because we'll still have the tax rate for those various funds. And the basis on which that rate's determined is a little bit different. I won't get on the specifics of that now, but it's very similar to what it was. It's actually better for us in some cases. We should get a little more revenue, but then when the money comes in, again, there's 2 different things. One is you have these 2 funds, but we'll still be tracking with a full chart of accounts, and so when expenses are made, they will continue to be made in very specific account numbers that are prescribed by the state. So when we want to know how much we're spending for transportation, it's not that it'll be buried inside this big fund. It will be in the sense of one fund, but it still has a series of account numbers that we pull out to say this is how much we spent in transportation, or this is how much we spent in the capital fund or capital expenses.
I have one more. Will all this new funding and transfer and what have you, will that require additional software to track, or we are good with what we have and we just...
No, we're good with all that, but
okay.
It's a lot of work to get from here to there, but as far as the tools to do it with, we're in good shape.
Fabulous. Thank you. Pam?
Yes, since you brought up this information, the state basic grant, that will stay in the education fund?
Yes.
All of it?
I'm hesitating. No, that's why I was hesitating, because that's an example where we'll get the basic grant, but then there will be transfers made
Because we're currently paying custodians,
Right.
et cetera, out of the state basic grant.
Yes.
So if that's moving into the other fund, then those funds from the basic grant will have to move with it.
That's where the transfer idea comes in, because
Okay.
take custodians, for example, it's over $5 million, and so now that's a part of the general fund, but beginning in 19, it'll be part of the operational fund, but the money still comes in all together, and so they haven't separated the way they distribute the revenue, but we are changing the way we're doing the expense and accounting for that. So that's where those transfers would. So if we would identify how much we're transferring that previously would have been in the general fund, and then that's likely to be the amount that we would ask you to transfer to the operational fund. Basically, the money will follow those expenses.
Well, it's too bad the basic grant can't stay in the educational fund, and then we'd have more money to spend in that particular area.
We'll talk to them about it.
Well, like anything new, I mean, this is a major, major change, and there undoubtedly will be some tweaking, if you will, as we move forward, because everybody's kind of collectively learning about this, all the school districts certainly, but also the state agencies that are, I mean, they're charged with giving us direction, but it's new to them too, so.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I've got one more question.
Yep.
Since you brought up the transferring and the board, you would be asking the board to transfer that. So is this going to be a monthly, we get paid monthly?
No.
No, okay.
No, we won't. We'll transfer. You can transfer more than once, but we'll likely look at this and make a transfer based on because we'll know how much of that budget we've moved over from what it otherwise would have been in the general fund.
Thank you. Katie?
What's the date for is it average daily student?
September the
ADM?
4th.
That's it?
ADM,
Mhm.
average
ADM.
daily membership.
Yeah, what's the date for that?
September the 14th.
Okay.
Which, that date just coincides, you remember
Coincides
the
with
policy
the
it
policy.
coincides with the policy you just approved, or read at least.
And that's not a firm date? That fluctuates each year based on the calendar? Mike? Yes. Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, yes, a question. I mean, yes, we're all used to the fact that the ending cash balance goes up when taxes come in and then down till the next one, and then when we get hit. Is August a 3 payroll month for us or no?
Let's see. I don't think it is, but we don't have it marked if it is. Yeah.
It says
Well, that was last year. Yeah. And it may be correct this year. I just don't remember which. There's 2 months, obviously, that have 3 pays. I just don't remember which 2 they are. March was one of them.
Any other questions or comments on this particular financial update? Okay. Be expecting a handful, if not more questions, at our workshop, because
That's right.
we are
Be
very much...
expecting a handful of answers.
Yes, well, that's fantastic. We appreciate that very much.
May not be the right answer, but I'll tell you something.
Better than that.
Okay, well, with that, then we'll move right into the superintendent's report. Dr. Beresford.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to congratulate Mr. McMichael on his talking about, the change in the funding, because it's going to be I think it's going to be an adventure for him and his department as we maintain the structure that we need to keep account of our cash flow and our funds, but at the same time work within this new set of rules. And also you'll need to understand that really what's being handed down is going to be work in progress from the state side as well. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments, I'm pretty sure. I think you said that very well, Roger, that we're all going to be learning a lot of different things, and I imagine there'll be some corrections as we go. I've just got a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Since this is our first meeting since the start of school, I want to tell you that our start of school was phenomenal. It was very, very good. And I visited 10 schools on the first day. And I was really impressed by our principals, our teachers, our staff, really the parents that were involved. our whole team, the Carmel Clay Schools team. It's a lot of work to make school happen for 16,514 kids. And it was a smooth start, and I couldn't be prouder of our team. I was able to go and see just a lot of different things. It was very exciting for me because I walked in and saw little elementary kids in kindergarten doing mindfulness activities and good character lessons, and there was creative use of technology. There was community circles and what I would call active learning, and I even saw trauma-informed best practices where they were taking kids and giving them a chance to have a community circle and unwind and get settled and get centered before they moved into some academic tasks. At the same time, on days 2, 3, or 4, and I was visiting as well, and I saw them starting to get into their routines and very intentional activities, and I saw some safety practicing some safety procedures, and just real solid educational practice. So. And also to see the Carmel Police Department and the Fire Department out greeting our parents and our kids, and of course the kids got a big charge out of that, and it was just real special. It was a beautiful day, the first day, and parents were walking with their dogs, and it was a big family affair going on there too. So it was really, really a good day, and I was really just proud of our team, and it was just special. I grabbed up a few stats if you wanted to hear some, like technology. This is just some examples of what the teams have been doing. Technology closed 2,878 tickets so far this year since the start of school. We haven't been in school that long. And a ticket means something's wrong with technology, and when it's closed, it means they fixed it. So that was pretty big. This summer, they introduced 5,076 additional Chromebooks into our environment. So I always say everybody's excited about school getting summer vacation starting, except for the technology department and the custodial department, because they've got a lot of work to do in the summer. But that was pretty impressive. Transportation, Mr. Ferran there gave me some statistics today that we're currently running about 7,538 miles a day. That's an average of about 44 miles a bus. And that would be 27,292 minutes per day. That's about 455 hours per day on the road, and that's about a little over 2.5 hours per bus on the road every day. Food service. So far this year, we've served 8,132 lunches. 7,677 fruit servings have been served. And you're probably wondering, what's that compared to vegetables? And it's 6,142 servings of vegetables. So, we're eating some vegetables. And anybody want to guess how many 8-ounce milks have been served? 5,426. 5,426. So anyhow, start of school, I just wanted to kind of give you some info so you could see how big a deal that really is, and just how proud I am of our team put forth those efforts. I'm going to try to highlight some of the departments as we do these throughout the year. Some other good news. 2 of our teachers from Creekside received Lilly grants this past summer. Stephanie Barnes did a Lilly grant, and these grants are to really rejuvenate teachers, and so they're really out of the box kind of proposals, and then they choose them. And Stephanie was able to go to California and Hawaii to learn how to surf. And my understanding is she didn't know how to surf at all, so she was doing it to kind of show perseverance and grit to take on this new adventure. And so she got to do that. And you may have seen a story about Josh Kendrick, who traveled across the country with his family and was to discover ways to reduce their carbon footprint. So that was covered in the newspaper, and a pretty interesting story about how the things they learned on vacation on how to try to lower the waste. So both those were pretty neat. Then our librarian at Orchard Park, Liz Quackenbush, was featured in a national magazine, and it was because of her Quackenbooks project that started in March 2016. And what this was is a student-led company. Basically, the goal of it was to increase the personal libraries of the kids at the school. And so to do that, they kind of opened their own bookshop. And the kids planned it, did a business plan, and they work as the cashiers and the stockers and the suckers, and they do all the work. And so this was this student personal libraries thing was about 50 cents a book, and there was a donation jar. And since that time, they have given away for free 10,000 books and sold 15,000. And all this was run by students in grades 3 through 5. So, and that was sent out across the country, so that was pretty cool. But my bell ringer for you is that Carmel High School's art teacher, Sarah Wolf, who was chosen as the Teacher of the Year for Carmel Clay Schools, was notified that she is in the top 10 in running for the Indiana State Teacher of the Year. And I was fortunate. One of the first teachers I met at Carmel Clay Schools was Sarah, because she was walking in the parade. And what an impressive person she is. But I wanted just to share a couple of things about her that I think is just special. She's an art teacher and is doing a wonderful job and impacts the lives of thousands of students, in the arts. But it's more than that, because she leads more than 750 students through a role as the House of Representatives sponsors. She's raised millions of dollars for charity through remarkable events like the Dance Marathon. And I said millions, not thousands, that was millions. And that was the Dance Marathon, Cancer Tailgate for Life, Community Blood Drives, all kinds of year-round initiatives. On top of that, she also is a sponsor for the Coquette and Charisma dance team, and they do dance for the boys and girls soccer games. A really cool story about her was she received national attention when she challenged her ceramic art class with random acts of kindness challenge for $20. And what resulted was 5,100 inspirational messages posted on every high school student's locker. And those positive messages were hope and encouragement. And so this is the kind of thing she does every day with her kids. So, that encouragement. So here's the quote from a student. Mrs. Wolf is a remarkable educator both inside and outside the classroom. Inside the classroom, she teaches students to cherish the arts and is always willing to lend a helping hand for a student in need. Her devotion to the students continues outside of the classroom, where she allows students to flourish and utilize our passions to make a positive difference in our community. Thanks to Mrs. Wolf, I will leave Carmel High School with a selfless spirit of helping others and a drive so fierce that I can accomplish anything I set my mind to.
Awesome.
And then from I think it was from the principal, Dr. Harmons, it's with great admiration that we honor Sarah as the 2018 Carmel Clay Schools Teacher of the Year. She is an incredible educator that challenges students not only to excel academically, but motivates them to be kind, caring, and compassionate leaders, both in and out of the classroom. She is admired by so many students and staff, and it is a privilege to be able to recognize her for this achievement. So bell ringer for the day for me is Sarah Wolf, but a lot of cool and great things going on at Carmel Clay Schools. And that concludes my report.
Wow, thank you.
Well, Dr. Beresford, that is pretty awesome, and I think I echo with the board. We really appreciate your superintendent report and our Friday reports. Those are very comprehensive and just a wealth of information that really helps us better understand all the great things that are happening in our school system each and every day. Next, we have our board member reports, and we'll turn to Katie first. Yes.
So I just kind of want to give like a little this is the school year starting, kind of like what my role is. So I serve on the Carmel Clay Parks and Recreation Board, and one of the great opportunities I have with that is that the Parks Department is in charge of our after school and before school care, which they call Extended School Enrichment, or ESE. And they serve each of our 11 elementary schools before and after school, and each school is different. So they customize the needs for each of the schools. They're not all little robot programs, which I think is really great that they do. They use our food services for their snacks before and after school, and they pay for that, so that's something that's income for us. And we also, at our last board meeting, just approved their latest latchkey contract, which is what they pay us to, or they work with us to be able to use our buildings. They also use our buildings in the summertime, too, for summer camps. So the Park District just completed their summer camp program with over 2,000 students participating, and some of those they use at our middle schools. So they do a lot of sports and different kinds of things like that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. So every month, mostly every month, I'll kind of give a report about how it's doing, the participation. They have over 102% cost recovery, so they've never lost money. So but they also do, like, they don't make a lot of money either, which I think is great. So it's not a profit-driven organization. So they really help serve our families, and they also provide scholarships. So if students need after or before school care but can't afford it, they definitely work with those families, which I think is a great program. So they serve quite a few kids that way. So I'll be keeping you updated throughout the year about how many kids are enrolled and different things that are going on with our Parks Department.
Thank you, Katie. We do not have any other scheduled board member reports. I do want to share that the board will be attending the Indiana School Board Association meeting on the 10th and 11th of September. I will have an opportunity to go to the Delegates Assembly on the 10th, that morning, and so on the 11th, I will be sharing with Mike, who is our legislative liaison, sharing with him what the final draft is, or the final version of the legislative priorities from the Indiana School Board Association, and then that'll help us further develop what our plan is for the upcoming year. We typically have our meeting on Monday. We will not be having our meeting on Monday. Our next board meeting will be on Tuesday, the 11th. A couple reasons. First, we'll be at ISBA, and we typically have to rush out of there to get here in time. Second, I know we have made it a practice of our board to respect religious high holidays for many faiths, and that happens to be Rosh Hashanah. And so we have shifted our dates to accommodate families that want to attend our meetings. Any other board reports or things we'd like to share tonight? No. Okay. Well then, thank everybody for joining us. Meeting adjourned.